refresh my link here. Still not showing. Give it another 10 seconds. Refresh it again. Yep, now I see it there. All right. Give it a little bit to see if anybody's going to join in, watch us live. If not, that's not a big deal. But I would like to wait to see if a couple people. We're running a little at 9 o'clock. It's not. It's a little late. There's still people up.
I've never done anything live before. This would be fun.
Yeah, it's fun. I hadn't either until recently, but it's cool. You get some interaction with the audience and stuff. So I think it's cool.
It's pretty cool.
I'm gonna share this to a group.
Yeah, I think I'll say it to Twitter as well. Copy link.
And then I'll share this one more time.
Okay.
All right, I'm just gonna share this quick on my personal page, and then we'll get started.
Is that a gun safe behind you, or?
Yeah, it's just too bad I have no guns to put into it. I lost them all in this freak boating accident last week.
Oh man, the sea is angry lately. It just seems like everyone's in boat accidents. Libertarians make up 80% of boating accidents. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know, and it's just weird that we always have all of our guns with us while we're on these boats. I mean, it's just a freak thing.
Surprised me was going on a ball without a license. Without a government license, we're just gonna crash immediately.
Cool. All right, well, let's get started. Well, welcome everybody. I don't know if anybody's watching live yet, but hopefully we'll get some of you coming in soon, or just for the rest of you that are tuning in after the fact, welcome. I'm Jacob Daniel with Daniel 3 Biblical Anarchy. I'm happy to be joined by Caleb Brown tonight of the, his page is the Catholic Anarchist, is that right?
Catholic Libertarian, but I am an anarchist.
Catholic Libertarian, yes, that's right.
Yeah. I swear, anarchist is tied up. I'm going to lose people immediately.
Yeah, well, libertarian's a good broader term, and then libertarians are minarchists, and then 6 months later, then they'll adopt the big A, right?
Oh yeah. So, I think it took me about 8 minutes. I was so quick.
I thought I was libertarian for a while. Then I encountered real libertarians, and then it was like over the course of a day, I went from minarchist to anarchist. It was rather quick for me.
Yeah.
So
that's it. I always call myself a libertarian, but really I was just a Ben Shapiro neocon.
Exactly. That was exactly me too. It was like, I mean, so originally, I've said this on my show before, but back in 2015, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. I voted for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary. I considered myself a centrist, but center left. I thought that we needed capitalism and needed a market, but we needed heavy regulations. We needed redistribution of wealth in order to make markets work. That was kind of my spiel. I still was kind of anti-war and anti-war on drugs and anti the corporatism and the corruption of government. Those were things I cared about, but I thought the solution was just pass the right laws, elect the right people, and get you solve it that way. Then I encountered, it was people like Ben Shapiro who challenged my economic views. So then when I was all right, well, I'm anti-war and I'm I wasn't anti-war enough. I was anti-violent, anti-gun, but I wasn't anti-war enough on a principled level. But because I started to trust capitalism more, I thought I was a libertarian, but I was really just a mixed bag of stuff. Then I encountered actual libertarians and, mainly those who were Rothbardians from the Austrian school. Yeah. And, they introduced me to Tom Woods and Dave Smith and A lot of other principled libertarians gave me a bunch of books to read, but yeah, it was a taxation is theft meme that got me into the conversation, because I kept seeing libertarians that I had on my Facebook feed share taxation is theft memes, and I was just like, what does this even mean? Like, is all tax? I was like, maybe some taxation is theft, but is all taxation theft really?
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't we need some of it? And then I went through all the. Yeah, exactly. I literally, unironically, was like, "What about roads? What about?" I mean, I literally did that, and then a person who's now my friend literally was like, "Did you seriously just say my roads?"
So. I got it on a T-shirt. I got my roads on a T-shirt.
That's funny.
No, like
but and then I encountered. So I got this. I actually got this shirt 2 days ago. But after I became after I became a actual libertarian and an anarchist, then I just was curious. I was like, are there any other Christians who are anarchists? So I searched on Facebook, and I found the Anarcho-Christian Facebook page and podcast by Stephen Rose, and that started a long journey of encountering all the different anarchists and Christian anarchists. So like I read Tolstoy, I read Spooner. I mean, I went through the everything, basically, the whole shebang, so to speak. What was your journey like? I mean, it sounds like we probably have a little bit of a similar background, but I'm curious to hear what led you to Christian anarchism.
Gone to politics around the age of 8, watching Fox News with my grandpa. First book I ever really read was Sean Hannity's book on terrorism. So I was like BoomerCon from like ages 8 to 17. Just cringy all the way around.
Right.
Found Ben Shapiro. It's like, I'm a libertarian now. I'm like Ron Swanson. Yay. Also this fake terrible on wars, terrible on drugs. I mean, every policy. I can't think of one thing besides like capitalism is all right. That was it. Then I found. Then I was like, I'm not voting for Trump a second time. That was wasting my vote. It's like, I'll vote for Joe Jorgensen. I didn't see one on Tom Wood's show. That's how I found Tom Wood. That's how I found Dave Smith, Michael Malice, Scott Holton, Bob Murphy, and from there it was like from Tom Woods to like probably a week. It was just down the rabbit hole. I'm like, well, I can't refute any of this, and I tried. Then I found the Christian Libertarian Institute, and it just from there just.
You mean the Libertarian Christian Institute?
Yeah, Libertarian Christian. I always get it backwards. I had on my podcast. They're great guys. I love them over there. Their website was invaluable. I mean, it convinced me of so many things. Then I found Zakus, I can't say his name. He's a French philosopher, Christian anarchist. Half his book is amazing. Half of it's like arguments for Christian anarchy from the Old Testament. Just really, really great. The other half of the book is all socialist nonsense. So you gotta take what you can get out of it. But after I read that one, I'm like, well, I guess I'm this guy. So it's probably like me and like 5 crazy people in the basement. Then, like you, I found the Facebook pages. And I'm like, I'm not alone. This is awesome.
Right? Yeah. It was so nice to encounter more people like me, because like I thought I was like, can you even do this? Like, can you be a Christian and a libertarian, let alone a Christian and an anarchist? I was like, I felt, and back then I was also a vegan, so I was like, I'm pretty sure that's a combination that I might have been the only one to do. Like vegan, Christian, anarchist. Like that's pretty niche.
I can only see that logically being consistent if you're like a pacifist. Like if you saw pacifism in there and you're just like, well, no harming of anyone, then I can like.
That was kind of my background. I was like, I was a leftist, but kind of a pacifist, which like made me think I was against war. But like, I wasn't against war in the sense of like American politics. I still very much believed in like the traditional ideas of like World War II was a moral war that was necessary to fight, and like I was like, war is like a last resort, but sometimes it's just absolutely needed. So but I was like, I don't like war. I think it's awful. To be fair, I think that's a lot of people would probably say that. A lot of people would say, even like people like Ben Shapiro would probably be like, well, war is awful. We don't like it. But then they find all these ways to justify it, so.
They're going to get nuclear weapon in 6 months. Just like you said a year and a half ago. It's like, this is the longest 6 months ever. Now, I mean, I know some conservatives who openly say like they are pro-war. I have a friend of mine who says, I am pro-war. I think we need more war. He's basically, Kevin Castley, that neocon dude. this openly pro-war. I don't know how people justify those positions, especially in a Christian framework, like Prince of Peace, pro-war. Those things, they seem very opposed to each other.
Yeah, for real. I mean, it's just like I'm not it's like a lot of Christian anarchists do go down the pacifist route. Tolstoy was very much for pacifism, and I'm definitely closer to pacifism than like BoomerCon or whatever. You know what I mean? Like if I had to choose one of the extremes, I'm obviously way closer and have way more in common with pacifists. But I just don't completely reject the idea of defense and also of as an anarchist, and really I kind of lean towards the anarcho-capitalism, so like Rothbardian anarchism. I do think that in the market there would be institutions that would use what I would call like defensive coercion or responsive force. So basically, like, I believe that obviously the initiation of force is immoral, but when people initiate force, I think there has to be some kind of societal institution to restrain them and to stop them. I obviously think that there's going to be a lot of ways in which those institutions are going to very much differ from the state institutions that we have today, and they'll probably be less violent, and they'll be funded with less violent means for sure, because taxation is a funding mechanism that is inherently violent and it's extortion. So. But there would still be a measure of force that would be at least allowable, even if I do like people like Bob Murphy who go into examples of how free markets promote pacifism, and they promote like voluntarism incentivizes people to find peaceful, nonviolent solutions. I definitely agree with that. I think that the amount of violence that would be necessary in terms of defensive violence in a free market society would be drastically less. And I'm never someone that, like, if you show me two solutions, one that's non-violent, one that is violent, but they're both going to work, we'll go with the non-violent one, obviously. And I do think that sometimes there are cringy ANCAPs and libertarians out there who go too much into like, well, because it's morally justifiable that I can protect myself and my property, I'm going to like relish in it and almost like I'm waiting for an excuse to shoot somebody or to be violent on somebody. I don't think that's Christian at all.
No, not at all.
And I've gotten like non-lethal rounds and stuff for my firearms because I think that there are ways to use force against someone, even to stop them, but that they don't ultimately end in their life, or at least like you load the first couple rounds with non-lethal ones, and if for some reason they're still going after that point, then you use those as a last resort. I think we should always be trying to push violence to the last possible option, and then even when you cross that line, to make lethal violence the last possible thing. But I just don't completely take them off the table like pacifists would.
No, I 100% agree. I'm much more of a NAP guy for me, like non-aggressive principle. That once I read that and understood that, I'm like, okay, that's it. That's my justification and rule for force. Let me ask you though, on anarchism and violence, are you more of the private prisons enforced by local militias, or are you more of the kick them out of the city-state, kick them out of town, and have this sun them from the community? Like, which one are you more on the side of in that conversation?
Yeah, I think there's room for both. I think it depends on the crime, depends on the type of society, like how you deal with crime in a rural or suburban area would probably need to be different than how you deal with it in a more urban environment. So yeah. I think there's no one size fits all. I don't think that private prisons even have to be enforced with militias, so to speak. I've heard models of private prisons in a free market setting where basically what happens is like people that, so like a lot of people think in a free market society that people would basically, like a normal thing that people would do because it's a societal norm and it's incentivized, is people would have individual insurance contracts with these DROs, basically dispute resolution organizations. And that if you commit a crime that like crosses a certain line where like basically, like the private courts have ruled that like you need to go to prison, that basically the financial incentives and structures would make it so that criminals would likely choose to go to prison because they'd be facing either total, so like it's kind of both. They'd be either facing, you're going to be completely ostracized and pushed into like, barren, unpopulated areas of the planet where like if you're gonna be have to be completely self-sufficient, live off the land. No one's going to trade with you. No one's going to interact with you. Or you can voluntarily check yourself in to these private prisons. I think the private prisons would actually compete with each other for the criminals. They'd be like, oh, here, like you still make money. You would have these kind of living quarters, and like here are the restrictions that you'd have to abide to. There'd be a contract for that, but they'd be free to leave and go to a different one. So like, and like I'm giving the very like TLDR version of all this, but you can I should find the I believe it's the Mises Institute website where I think it was Rothbard went into all the different ways that this can happen. So yeah,
doesn't Bob Murphy
really interesting?
Doesn't Bob Murphy cover that in Chaos Theory, or am I getting that from one of his other works? I think it was Chaos Theory.
Yeah, I think he has too. Yeah, I think several people have. But I remember the first time I read it, I thought it was a Rothbard. I read an article about it on the Mises Institute website. It very well could have been Bob Murphy. Could have been an excerpt from Chaos Theory or something. So, but yeah, I think it's kind of both. Like it's basically like you give violent criminals the like, okay, well, you committed violence and you weren't killed from people defensively responding to you. Now you have two choices: complete societal ostracization, basically, like you're kicked out, or you choose these prisons. If they continue in violence, that's where like local militias and private security forces come into play, I would think, to restrain them. And I just don't understand what Christian pacifists would do with that. It's like what are you supposed to do to stop people who are like, I don't think this is going to be super common, but it is going to happen occasionally. You're going to have someone who, whether it's some kind of like chemical imbalance or just some kind of, I don't know how everyone has different beliefs in the Christian community as far as demonic possession and influence and all that. Like, I don't know, but just whatever the cause is, there are definitely going to be people in society that go on rampages of theft or murder, rape, whatever. And it's like, we shouldn't let that go unabated. You have to use some force. Now there are some Christian pacifists who agree, use some force, but just you're never authorized to use lethal force. And I just think it's like, I don't know, like eventually, like sometimes like it kind of comes down to that in terms of like if you're catching somebody in the act of something and you're trying to stop them. I mean, it gets a little messy, and I still have love for my pacifist brothers and sisters in the Christian community, but I think that their worldview is it's just not realistic and workable at the end of the day. Although I think some of them are really extreme about it, then there's others. Like I had a conversation on pacifism with Abby, her last name Kleckner, who is a contributor to the Bad Roman Project with Craig, and our conversation was really good actually, because although she's a pacifist, she's not as like much of like a pure pacifist, or like I think you're sinning or in grave error if you use force. She just thinks that like pacifism needs to be the preference. It needs to be the goal. And it's like, I can agree with that. Like pacifism should be kind of the goal ultimately, but it's just, we also have to recognize that like we're going to probably fall short, and we shouldn't like discourage people from using force if necessary.
No, I 100% agree with all of that. Like I'm much more of the social norms and exercising people out of the community side than the private prison side. I would say the private, like people go to the prisons themselves kind of situation reminds me of Old Testament biblical slavery. People would sign on to servitude, they'd walk off a debt, and they would live on the places. They live on the farm, whatever it was, and they would just walk off the debt. It reminds me of Old Testament slavery or servitude. Is very similar to the how a preferred prison system would operate in a free society.
I think that's roughly how it would go. And it's all guesses, it's all theory. I mean, we're not there yet, but I mean, I think we can all, there's even more theories out there about how it would work, and even the theories that I find to be the worst, or either the least likely or the least likable, they're better than what we have now.
Yeah.
We have like the world's biggest prison population, and it's mostly filled with people who have committed either no crime, like they were falsely accused, or like it's crimes where there's no real victim. It's victimless crimes, nonviolent ones, just like like, oh, I had marijuana in my car, and now I'm in jail, or like you had enough and then people like Ben Shapiro, like, oh, they're on distribution charges. It's like, yeah, that's because they were caught with so much weed that like the DAs and stuff would be like, oh, well, we can prove intent to distribute because of how much they had. And even then it's like, oh, well, who cares if they were going to distribute weed? Like, who cares?
In Florida, the minimum sentencing for distribution, the numbers are all screwed up. This guy got caught with like 18 pills on him for somebody had a subscription for it, went out, and he had like the leftover subscription. He had like he got illegally. He had 18 pills, and they're like 18 pills. That's a supply, 15 years minimum. That's a week and a half supply for one individual. The cops have no clue how much is what and how to judge that properly. And because of that, so many people are in there for like distribution charges, when it's like, no, they had a week and a half to maybe 2 weeks supply, and used to them for 15 years because they're drug dealers. It's so stupid how people who are experts in the criminal justice field know anything about drugs. It's so biased and stupid. I think it was someone on Twitter, I can't remember who it was, and they said, if you haven't considered breaking people out of prison for nonviolent drug charges, you wouldn't have been abolitionist in the 1800s. I don't know. I'm not 100% there, but I get the sentiment and convincing arguments. I feel like it's a tough one.
Yeah, and I mean, like, when it comes to this subject of drugs, like, nobody can accuse me of bias, because like I have yet to touch anything regarding weed or cannabis or of the sorts. Like I might have used CBD oil once, so I mean sue me if that's crossing the line or something. But I mean, like, I've never been high. I've never used any kind of recreational drug. I mean, I have a beer here, so I mean, like, I don't know. Some Christians get triggered by that. But,
the Baptists are screaming right now.
Right. Jesus turned water into wine, but it was just grape juice.
It was grape. Yeah, they didn't have wine to the 1700s. I've been told.
Yeah, I love that. I love that line. But yeah, like other than that, and maybe like I've my dad smokes cigars like once a year or twice a year. I go to a cigar bar with him, but I hate it. Like, I don't even, like, he yells at me. He's like, he'll be like, you wasted that perfectly good cigar. And I was like, I'm only here to spend time with you, not because I enjoy doing this. So yeah, like, I have no incentive for it, but I just think it's stupid. It's like, they're not hurting anybody. And it just, like, I am very much a nap type of anarchist or libertarian, because I just think it really crystallizes the philosophy, which is like, it is a thin philosophy of sorts, because I don't think that the non-aggression principle is all you need to live a good life. Obviously, as a Christian, I think that there are other things that God has instructed us as far as, like, in trying to walk a path of righteousness and trying to become more Christ-like. Absolutely. But that is kind of like the different categories, right? Like, we have this one category of, of like laws and rules and stuff that deal with like civil justice. And I think that that's what libertarianism is. It's like, how do you engage in the world? How do you engage in society? What is right and wrong for you to do in terms of like human interactions? And I think that almost all of that is summarized by the NAP. But then there's a different level, like a different set of rules and like a higher morality or ethics that Christians are called to when they commit their life to Christ, which, Christ said, if you love me, you'll follow my commands. And these are less about, it's all connected, but to me, they're less about how you treat other people, and they're more about commitment to God and submitting to God and letting the Holy Spirit transform you. And I think it's kind of like recognizing the only true authority is God, and all authority comes from God, and He knows what's best for us. So it's kind of like a trust thing. It's like, why am I choosing not to engage in XYZ behaviors, even if they're voluntary and they don't hurt anybody? It's because I trust that God knows what's best, and that like God has said that this is the best way to live life. This is what is best for you. This is what most gives glory to me, and this is the model that God has given us. I do believe that we're called to do that voluntarily, though. Like, you can't, like, I'm not, like, I'm a Reformed Christian, so I come from, like, I don't like the term Calvinist so much, but that's, I don't know, like, that's the most common one people have heard of. I like John Calvin, but I'm a much bigger fan of Abraham Kuyper and the Dutch reformers. So like more of a neo-Calvinist in that regard. But yeah, a lot of the Reformed school of theology, unfortunately, kind of leans into like the theonomy side of things, which I'm very much against, because I think like the story of the Bible kind of goes into how like, well, we've tried that and it doesn't work, because what we actually came to, like the conclusion of the New Testament, was that the law, it wasn't that the law was bad, but the law was to serve a specific purpose, which was to point us towards Christ. And now we have Christ. We are still called, of course, to abide by like the norms of civil justice, of course, which I think are summarized by property rights and the non-aggression principle. But as far as, and I think those are things like you can force people to not initiate force, which is a weird way of looking at it. But it's like you can, like the nap can be said backwards in a way that's like, when it, like if you're not allowed to initiate force, it's kind of like the idea of like rights, and rights are entitlements. Entitlements meaning like you can demand from people action, but like as libertarians and anarchists, I'm sure you would agree with me, we believe in negative rights, which means that like what you can demand from people is that they do not violate your rights. So it kind of looks that way. Like the only thing you can force on people is that they don't violate their rights. Anyone's rights, yours, your neighbors, or whatnot. What you can't force on them are those secondary, I mean, not secondary in terms of importance, but secondary in terms of like just in order of how I'm laying it out. These moral commands, these moral guidelines to living life and submitting to God that come after you have chosen, you've been elected and you've chosen to follow after Christ. Those are things that come through like a renewing of your mind and learning and growing deeper in your relationship to Christ. You can't force those on people though. Like if they're not a Christian, then it's like, well, it's wrong for you to force that on them.
Exactly. So many Christians have the worst definition of freedom that leads them to think they have the freedom is obligation. Therefore, they have the freedom is all positive rights. You have obligations, and I think it was one of the popes said, freedom is not the right to do what you want, but the right to do what you ought. And it's like, well, who decided the ought? That's like stupid as hell. Sorry the language, I try to avoid it, but that's just really stupid. Who decided the ought in that entire conversation? And it's led to so many problems with Christian theology and Christian politics. It's like, well, you're not free to sin. It's like, well, I'm sorry, Adam and Eve were free to sin. Clearly, God gave them gifts of freedom. Otherwise, they wouldn't have ate the apple. If they didn't want, I don't know. It's just the whole definition of freedom that Christians use leads to so many terrible political outcomes, like on drugs and even on guns sometimes. Like, as I say, like you're not free to harm people, therefore you shouldn't have guns because even defensive violence is bad. Like, what kind of argument is that? Not free to defend yourself. I'll start ranting. So, it's
good. It's good. I completely agree. It's completely disastrous. How Christians have mixed this with politics, and it's just, to me, it's completely un-Christ-like. Like, why was, I always pose it this way: why was Jesus rejected by the Jewish people, like on large, as Messiah? Because he didn't fit their interpretation of what the Messiah was, which was they thought the Messiah was supposed to be a political figure who's supposed to come down and lead this war, this revolution, this physical revolution against Rome and reinstitute the kingdom of Israel, basically. But what Jesus came and was constantly talking about was like, well, my kingdom is not of this world, and the war that I've come to fight, the war that we are fighting, is not against flesh and blood, but it's against principalities and darkness. It's so much deeper than that. And you people are rejecting me because you're so focused on earthly kingdoms and you're focused on what is temporary. But Jesus came to fulfill a much deeper, a much broader, a much bigger, a much more righteous ministry, which was for the forgiveness of sins, which was to restore what was lost, was for the reconciliation of all people back to God, back to the Father. And he didn't ever in his walk force people to follow him or force people to stop sinning. And in fact, he would heal people and he would feed them and meet their needs even while living in sin, even while they didn't deserve it. Now, he did, there are examples where obviously he would tell people, like he'd heal them or help them and say, now go and sin no more. Like, I'm not saying that Jesus condones sin or loves sin. Absolutely not. But this, obviously, I think the New Testament shows that what God is working towards is not a relationship between God and man where God instructs man to force morality on people. Like, it's not the model that Christ taught us. Rather, he taught us to go out and to love our neighbor, to serve the least of these, and to lead them to God, lead them to Christ. And through the Holy Spirit, people can then, after they've come to Christ, the Holy Spirit and the church helps to lead them more towards the path of righteousness. That is not, and it's not done coercively. That's not done through force. That's not the model. It just isn't.
Like this is in my opinion, this is one of the worst things the state has ever done throughout our history. Is they've been around so long that people don't even blink an eye at force anymore. It's just such a common part of life nowadays that you're forced to do so many things that it's like, well, I'm forced to pay tax. I might as well be forced to do everything else. That no one even asks me and says, hey, is it wrong that I'm trying to force people to live how I think is the right way to live? Like no one asks that anymore because it's just so commonplace that force is a staple of our society. It's so broken. And no, but as Christians, if we started saying the things, see this, if as Christians we start not helping people based on them living terrible lives, like I say, oh, well, this person's a prostitute, so we can't even talk to them. Like, what kind of Christian? Like, if a church was doing that, they'd be the worst church ever. And we know what churches are Westboro Baptist, and they are the worst church. Like, we make fun of them ruthlessly. I mean, atheists are cringe, but when Christians make fun of the church, it's going after a pretty bad church.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like when people say, like, how can you invite sinners into your church or people that are doing certain behaviors or like, living blatantly in their sin? I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, Jesus was often accused of hanging out with sinners and you know what I mean? Like, he wasn't hanging out with the religious elite and all that. Like, I just, like, obviously if people are being violent, that's different. But if people are just stuck in patterns of sin, it's like, well, I don't know. How are you going to lead them to Christ if you, like, tell, it's like, isn't it like that same, it's like that, what's that old, like, you need experience to get a job, but need a job to get experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you need God to overcome your sin, but before you can come to church and God, you have to overcome your sin. It's like, wait, no, that doesn't work.
That doesn't work.
Yeah, so it's just silly. The other way that, so like we met through two means. We were both Christian libertarians, Christian anarchists, but we also are both, and I think I'm much more involved than you are, but we both kind of pay attention to the Libertarian Party. You know about the Mises Caucus. I think you're either like, loosely supportive or affiliated with them. I don't know if you're
I got the hoodie
or not.
I think I am a member.
I mean, the hoodie is how we determine our official membership. So you're a member. No.
Well, I'm a member. I love the Facebook group. That's what got me into basically that Facebook group. So, I got in there. I'm like, well, I found my people. I found people who talk liberty and post memes and do a little bit too much trolling, and maybe a little too much. But I can't talk. I do this as much too. For sure. Yeah, I'm more involved probably than you are. I mean, so I'm on the national Facebook group as a moderator and help with approving new members and onboarding them. And then I'm also involved in my state of PA as a state organizer for the Mises Caucus. But then also I'm involved in my local county Libertarian Party of my county, and then also my state of the LPPA. So I'm a dues-paying member both nationally and of my state. And I don't know if anybody in the Liberty Movement has like been living under a rock and doesn't know this, but the last week in the Libertarian Party has been something else. Most unlibertarian thing I've been
following along with it.
I've been I try my best. I was listening to Tom Woods, Carol Ann Hollis talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And when she said Zopus of Hinchman was pro mandatory vaccination, I literally threw my phone across the room like, I'm done. I can't do this. No, this guy's not a libertarian. He can't be a part of the party. I'm out. I lost it. I'm following it the best I can. The fact they're trying to move Carol Ann Hollis is a crime. That Liberty grandma's got to stay. You don't kick your grandma out.
Right. Yeah. No, it's it's so ridiculous, and it's like it's over decorum. It's like, well, she's cursed in meetings and been nasty with us. It's like, well, I don't know. I mean, if you've ever listened to those Ellen's.
You support, they said nothing about the lockdowns. The main dude's pro-mandatory vaccinations. And it's like, you're supporting what might cause more suicides than any suicides war in the last 20 years. And she's like, oh, she said the F word. What is this nonsense? The states call the people to commit suicide, drug overdoses, and side abuse and starvation. You're like, but the F word, you pansy, you have. I'm so mad. I signed that petition to kick out Joe Bishop Hinchman, and they asked for a reason, and I just put he's a bitch. That was the only reason. That was it. I hate all these people, the blue pill, or whatever you want to call them. They artsy flower, all these types. Like, what was it? Joe Bishop made the best argument for the Republican Party was why would he want to be in a party with artsy flower? That was the best argument he's ever made. Like leave the LP. Just not be associated with Artsy Flower. He almost sold me on it at one point.
I mean, I've certainly had many disagreements with Archie Flowers, but he's much lower on my list than a lot of other people's probably in terms of like. I actually don't think Archie's even a bad libertarian. I just think that. He's I think he has his principles at least somewhat right, but I just think that my disagreement with Archie, and I've talked to him about this, is just like is prioritization, and it's very much like crystallized by this thing with Karen Ann Harless, which is like, why are we making such a big deal about like things like decorum or people saying the F word when like, you know, how many people died today because of a drone strike that was used with American-made missiles or issued by an American military unit? You know, how many people are suffering in prisons and in cages at the border? I mean, it's just like when you compare, like, what's the Libertarian Party? It's the party that represents libertarianism, which is a bunch of people, and like it should be a bunch of people like going up against the omnipotent cult of the state to bring down this empire and stop all these evil atrocities. So it's like we're going up against people like Hillary Clinton and like and these people that like may or may not have been associated with this giant scandal with Jeffrey Epstein and this may
not eat children for the aminochrome. We don't know. They may.
Right. So it's like, you know, for like basically Washington is filled with war criminals, pedophiles, and everything in between. But what we really need to talk about is the fact that Karen Ann Harless said some mean things on an email chain. It's like, really, guys? Really?
I'm going to say, if you look at all
like with Archie, like going all the way back, there was a meme shared in the Facebook group that was insensitive to trans people.
The meme like violated the NAP.
And it's just like, and again, it's like, no, and it's not that I'm advocating that people be shitty with each other. Like, I don't want people to be shitty with each other. But when they are, it's like, all right, what do you want me to do about it? Like, am I being shitty to you? If I am, then talk to me about it. If it's other people being shitty to you, if they're not violating the NAP, then it's like, I don't know, just, it's the internet. Get over it. Like, let's continue to do the things that we have to do to combat the state. Like, this is some real fucking... I don't want to say the F-bomb.
I'm trying.
You know what? In honor of Karen Ann Harless, I will drop my first F-bomb on my podcast. I don't care if I get demonetized. I'm not actually monetized, but I don't care if I get canceled on YouTube, on Facebook. Like... Who cares about, like, people breaking fucking decorum? Like, I'm sorry. Like, who cares about, like, fucking mean words on the internet? Like, screw it. Like, this is not what matters. This is not what our priorities should be. Exactly. Like, if you're gonna convince me, like, I'm very sympathetic to guys like Craig and others who say, like, Christians should just, like, you know, screw politics and just, like, preach the gospel, preach Christian anarchism, no king but Christ. It's like, I was on board that for a while. Then I got involved with the Mises Caucus and the LP because, like, they made good arguments to me about how, like, this can actually be effective in helping to bring more people into, like, because, like, I don't care about winning elections. I care about bringing more people into the movement. And that's what I don't think people like Craig and others understand. I don't want people to win. I mean, at least not to win positions of any consequence. Like, I don't want a libertarian president. I don't want libertarian governors. I don't want libertarian generals. I want to dismantle the system. And the political process is just a means for dismantling and opposing the system and for bringing more people into the libertarian movement, making more libertarians and more anarchists and more people who oppose the cathedral, who oppose the omnipotent cult of the state. So that's what my goals are. And like, if they're going to win elections, do it at the local level. And I like the strategy the Mises Caucus puts out, which is decentralization and nullification, which means nullify the shit out of all this stuff at the local level through the 10th Amendment strategy that like people like Michael Bolden and Michael Meharry, who is the host of the Godarchy podcast, a very prominent Christian anarchist in our current movement. He's
pretty awesome.
Yeah, and he's involved in the LP and the 10th Amendment Center because he believes in that strategy of decentralization and nullification. It does work. I'm not saying it works for everything, but like, you know, there's two things. One, bring down the state, and two, in the meantime, even if the state's not brought down, if we can get less people being put in jail, less authority for the police to be rounding people up for nonviolent crimes, like, why wouldn't you support that is my argument. But at the same time, if you want me to be involved in the LP, like, you have to convince me the leadership needs to be libertarian and have their priorities straight. They can't be like, you know, bitching and moaning about mean words on the internet. Like, I'm sorry. I'm so done with it. And it's funny because I'm usually the person calling for civility. Like, I'm usually the level-headed person trying to get people to stop shit posting so much and to stop saying mean words and to say, oh, like, you went too far there. That was too edgelordy. Like, you know, like, I got upset. Like, remember that meme maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago where someone shared, I think it was
meme?
No, it wasn't the what? Yeah, the We Are meme. Yeah, the We Are meme. Yeah, the way that was shared looked like bullying and harassment to me, and I didn't like it. And so I on my Twitter, I said, guys, this is like, no, stop. Like, we can't be telling like implying that trans people should be dead, even if you think it's a joke, even if like I'm sorry, like, to me that was too far. Yeah. But like, so it's like, it's not that like I don't empathize with like, like, I don't want people to be shitty with each other on social media and edgelording to that degree. And like, people got so little like people actually I'll save this for later. But yeah, like, I want people to be civil, and I want messaging to be balanced between being edgy and being productive, but spend less time. Like, it's one thing to even like have a private conversation after the fact to be like, I think your strategy here is bad, or I think these, like, so people were upset with New Hampshire, of course, over those like really like aggressive tweets about child labor and the Civil Rights Act and all that. And it's like, you want to have a conversation. Ones. Yeah, the John McCain ones. Like, you want to have a conversation with those people to be like, that's a little bit too much for the official Twitter account. Go ahead and have that conversation. But to have this like giant machine of public outrage and these social media mobs going after people and saying they need kicked out of the movement and they're awful and all this.
Paleo-libertarians.
Right, yeah. And saying we have to stop the Mises Caucus because they're alt-right entryists. And it's just like, F off with that crap, man. Like, I have yet to meet one active Mises Caucus member who is alt-right or racist or transphobic or any of this shit. Like, I'm just tired of it. Like, yeah, there's trolls on the internet. Shocked Pikachu face meme emerges. Like, I should edit that into the non-live version. It's like trolls and shitty people exist on the internet. Wow.
No,
okay,
what?
But like, active members, active leadership, like, no, it's not there. Look at the platform. Look at what we're doing. It's not there. Like, you're spending all this time now, and like, so to go through events, like, just really briefly, it's like New Hampshire puts out a bunch of tweets that people don't like. They find out the guy who's behind it.
Before we go over the breakdown, I just want to add something real quick about the whole messaging thing.
Yeah,
I'm in partial agreement with you that it should be more civil. I'm more of I trust libertarians to not be terrible, and I trust that some people are going to be convinced of the message than I was convinced. And I know some people, if they hear a radical, hey, you fucking suck, and here's why, that might be more work to convince them than the more civil messaging. And I trust libertarians to be better, good enough libertarians to actually make the arguments to convince the sick people they deal with. I hope organized, like, only downside with this argument is that people rope libertarians into one big group. I'm like the lollybuts and all that stuff. We all get roped together, and so that one dude is making me look bad. Like, I'm nothing like David Fite. David Fite's nothing like Pete Quinones. You know, these are very, 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 very different people. And if we want all roped together in one group, oh yeah, they're both great. If they want all roped together into one name, it'd be easier for us to have our different strategies. But because we all get roped together and blamed for each other's nonsense, I see the point of maybe being more civil, but I still lean towards trusting individuals to go towards their own, attract their own audiences in a better way than central planning doesn't work. I don't know why it wouldn't work if it doesn't work anywhere, I don't see why it would work for political planning.
But yeah, that's true. And it's okay. Like, I like David Fite. Like, I've had him on my podcast and talked to him.
He's great.
I like the guy a lot. Pete Quinones does a lot of great work. I think he does way too much edgelording on Twitter, and like I call him out for it sometimes. I'm like, dude, like, come on, like this is just like, to me, it's just childish behavior. But like, I get some people do that, and like I'll complain about it. But when they keep doing it, it's just like, okay, like you're gonna keep doing it, so like I'm just gonna ignore you when you do that stuff. I still like when Pete does good things and makes good points and makes good articles and podcasts. I still share them. I still don't think he makes valid contributions. I just think the edgelording crap it gets old after a while. It's like, you know, I'm not against all edgelording, but it's just, I don't know. I think there's a degree, there's like a level of diminishing returns where it's just like, is it actually helping you or is it hurting you? I don't know. But it's like, people get upset with Pete Quinones because he keeps doing it. And it's just like, okay, so you have two choices. Expend time and energy going after him, complaining him, trying to get him canceled, or ignore him and put that energy towards productive things.
Yeah.
It's like, because it's like, and now people would make the counter argument, well, people like Pete and people like Jeremy Kauffman, people like the people in New Hampshire, like, they're making the libertarian movement look bad. And I'm just like, guys, we pull it like 1%, and we're obscure. Like we're already considered a joke. Like, yeah, maybe we're pulling it 40 or 50%. Maybe I'll be a bit more concerned. I don't know, but it's at the same time, it's like, even then, it's like, I think that and I think you kind of alluded to this. You need people to pay attention to you, and like, this is how I found libertarianism, was like, people were being edgy on Facebook, sharing taxation as theft stuff, and that got me interested. Like, that got me, like, you know, alarmed enough to like go and talk to people. You know what probably wouldn't have led me to talk to libertarians? If people put out like this nice polite message of like, you know, if the tax rate was reduced from the effective 45% it is now to 32.6%, we would see a GDP growth of this much and people would have this much more wealth. Like, that would not have incited me to go and look into Murray Rothbard or Tom Woods.
Probably would have commented, okay, nerd. That would have been my own response, like, okay, nerd. Or the let her speak thing, you know, like the whole Jorgen's like, she got bit by a literal bat during COVID season, and it was ignored. How is that? She got bit by a bat, and it was just like, nope, on to the next thing. That is newsworthy. I mean, I voted for her, and I honestly, I don't know how I feel about voting for her. Spike Cohen's great. Jorgensen. My profile pic for why was a picture of me and Joe Jorgensen, and I changed it because I don't want to be roped into the blue pill people.
I like Jorgensen. I really like Spike, but yeah, Jorgensen just was like, she's good on the issues. Like, she's actually a really good libertarian, but she just wasn't very effective at messaging because she kind of was tone deaf to like what was going on in society, and all her talking points were from the 90s. Like,
we want to be like Switzerland. No one wants to be like Switzerland. The left doesn't even want to be like, the left's like, they misunderstand the social program, saying it's socialism, not welfareism. And the right's like, I don't want to be like some European. I want to be American, man. Like, it's just, who are you convincing with that? No one. You're not convinced. You convinced me, I guess. Like, so maybe me and like 5 people, because he got me in the party. But
I just think at the end of the day, it's like, and I don't want to I want to be as fair to the critics as possible. I'm not saying it's a false dichotomy between either being as edgy as possible or as milquetoast as possible. Like, yeah, I do think effective balance can be reached, but that balance is probably going to be achieved through a more decentralized market process, right? Like, there's going to be some people who are being really edgy, some people being moderately radical, some people who are being more pragmatic. And I don't know, I think all these things work together, and we don't all have to say the same thing. And like if you spend less time criticizing people for saying things you wouldn't and just go out there and say the things that you would say, I feel like that's just more productive. Not to mention, like, let's say I completely agreed with the blue pilled people as far as like the Jeremy Kauffman tweets and the New Hampshire tweets were bad and just shouldn't, and like people shouldn't see them. Well, when you engage in the Twitter reaction mob of like, quoting it and sharing it and saying how awful it is, you're giving it more exposure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, if there's something you don't like, it really is like whether you're talking on a principled level, a kind of like praxeological level, or just a measured damage control level, the best thing you can do is ignore it. No matter what it is. If it's bad, then just ignore it and less people will see it. You can divert those resources towards better things. I think that's the best way to go about it. Spend less time criticizing people for how they try to, convince people of liberty. And like the other thing is like if you bring people, some people would say, well, I get people that are like considering libertarianism, then they see this tweet and they go, well, if that's what you're about, then I'm out. Well, the response to that is, okay, well, libertarianism is about the individual. It's decentralized, which means there are going to be people who call themselves libertarians, but they're going to have all sorts of different backgrounds and views, and then we're all going to slightly differ. We're not like the Democrats or the Republicans, or other groups where it's like we all have to think and say the same thing. Yeah. So it's like, hey, when you become a libertarian, if you don't like the Mises Caucus, you don't like Jeremy Kauffman, then guess what? Just say, I'm not that type of libertarian, and they're not who I choose to associate with, and just leave it at that. And
I've had this argument. Yeah, I've had to do. I've tried to bring my some of my right wing friends into libertarianism, and I point to people like someone will point to Zorgas as being weak and terrible because he doesn't care about culture, and some people will point to people who are more radical like Rothbard and be like, "Oh, he's just a crazy anarchist." And I'll point to people on the right, but I'll point to Richard Spencer and Ben Shapiro and Sean Hannity. Like these people are all called Nazis. None of them are the same. Like one's Jewish, one might be an actual Nazi, one's a boomercon. Look at our party. Why can't you apply the same principle? You're all called Nazis. We're all called libertarians. We're all a little different. Like you do the same thing on your side. Why can't you just apply the same principle to our side? It's just an in-group bias. They can't even get out of it.
Yeah, I think like we already, like people in the Mises Caucus, we already do that. Like when we're talking to people and they don't like Joe Jorgensen or Gary Johnson or Bill Weld or just like different people who've said things in the Libertarian Party or movement, we say like, okay, well, like, those are different people saying different things. We have a different set of priorities and strategies. So like join us and, we're going to pursue our thing. Then, if somebody says, oh, I don't like the Mises Caucus and this kind of thing, it's like, okay, well then go join the Prags and do their thing. It's like, isn't competition part of...
Can't join them anymore.
Well, yeah, true. Well, that's a different story. But the point is, like, isn't competition part of libertarianism too? It's just like, and it shouldn't be healthy competition, not like these people are evil and the devil, and
it shouldn't be backroom deals. It shouldn't be backroom deals from anonymous co-conspirators trying to steal people's property. I mean, that's like such corporatism and such statism that is just like I would say that was the point Craig made that I actually kind of liked. Is he's like the Libertarian Party is for people who want to be statists, and it has been. It really kind of has been for a while that the Libertarian and you can, this is actually like historically kind of true. Like you can go research the Portland Massacre, which is basically the event where the LP was kind of taken over by the Prags and they gutted the platform and like reinstalled a new one, and it became very much more of a, because like the founder of the Libertarian Party, like I think his name was Nolan, and the original purpose of the party was not primarily about like trying to be statist and trying to win elections. It was about education and bringing people into the movement. And so, like, I see the Mises Caucus as kind of like they're trying to restore the party to what it was. And it's like, again, like if I was joining the party with the goal of like we need to get to 20% of the vote, and then 30% of the vote, and then 40% of the vote, and we need to get our candidates into the Washington
and we need to rule from on high, then I would be a very bad anarchist. And Craig would have absolutely, he'd be absolutely valid and right in calling me and other people like me out. But that's not what we're doing. We are trying to make, it's right to criticize the LP. We criticize the LP. We're trying to change it. We're trying to and people hate the takeover rhetoric, but that's what it means. And it's not violent. It's just hey, listen, you guys constructed a democratic entity. We're joining the entity. We're going to get enough numbers in that we're trying to win leadership positions and take the party to a different direction that we think is actually libertarian, which is about decentralization, which is about not fighting the state by centralizing and winning elections and then trying to force libertarianism from the federal government or something. That just wouldn't work. Yeah. That's stupid. But if that by the time you would get to the point where you were winning elections at that level, you'd be so far off the reserve of what libertarianism is that it wouldn't work. Instead, we promote a strategy of decentralization, and the party is a tool for growing the movement. And that's what it's about. Because if you hit a critical mass of people who reject the state, guess what? That's going to bring down the state just through natural processes. And I don't think everybody has to do it. I love what people like Craig and others do in their podcasts and their activism. I don't think we all have to do the same thing. I think we all can have our different spheres of influence. We can all specialize in different areas. Division of labor applies to all things in life. It's it's kind of like that, and it's even biblical. There's that I forget what book it is. It's probably Corinthians, I think. Where Paul talks about the different parts of the body, and the foot is different from the head, and the hands are different from the legs, and why would the eyes can't go to the foot and yell at the feet for not doing things that are the eye's job. We all have different gifts, we all have different callings, and we complement each other when we do that. The market doesn't work if you all try to do the same thing. It's have you ever read the articles about how pencils are made, and can you imagine
iPencil by who was it? I can't remember. Robert T. No, I might have to look it up later because it's gonna bug me now. But I can't remember who it is.
Yeah, I'm really bad with names. But it's the whole idea. It's what if everybody just made the wood? Then you'd have a bunch of empty wood pencil sticks with no actual graphite in them and no erasers, or you know what I mean. It's you need people to do different things so you can create the final product. And I think libertarianism, I think a free society, if we're going to get there, it's going to come from people fulfilling different roles. We need the agorists, we need the people out there educating people through social media and not engaged in the LP. But I think we also need I would want either one of two things to happen. Either the LP needs to just disappear, or as long as it's going to exist and it's going to be, let's face it, inevitably, when people start rejecting the duopoly and rejecting traditional statism and looking for a third, looking at something else, libertarianism in the LP is, very often what a lot of people will first look at. They'll be I'm going to check this out. We need that to be as good of an institution as possible to actually plug people into the libertarian movement and and help educate them on libertarianism so that we can grow the movement. Because too many people check it out and they go, this is a joke, and leave. And then they go back to their duopoly parties. I'm not saying it's the only way, but it is one possible avenue. And so that's why I do it. And I don't say everybody has to do it.
Who was it? Was it Dave? I can't remember who it was, but someone said, we live in a country where most people only pay to politics for 6 months out of every 4 years. And we have to capitalize on that one window to really get the most people on board. Twitter is tipping into a longer period, but most people focus only for a few months, when the debates start happening. And if you have a libertarian in the debate, where did the party go the most? Ron Paul. And if you could have someone in the debates, someone on the news or on the podcast, even Joe Jorgensen, let me tell you what, the only reason I'm really supporting Dave Smith right now is because Joe Jorgensen even got on Ben Shapiro show, and I want Dave Smith to go on that show, and it's to drill him on the war. That's the only reason I'm supporting him, is I want that to happen. And if you even pull off say 10% of Shapiro's audience on the war stuff, that's a lot of people. If you
it really is. I mean,
like, you got to capitalize on it.
I brought this up in my debate with Craig that we did a while back. I was like, look at how much of the liberty movement exists today because of Ron Paul. I was like, if nothing else, I think that there's always going to be a need for principled libertarians and anarchists to be in that political theater. If for nothing else other than using that platform to do like what Ron Paul did and boldly call out the corruption and boldly point out the principles. And that inspired a movement that grew the liberty. Like, it's not about growing the party, it's about growing the movement. Yeah. And I think that's a brilliant example, and that's absolutely. I mean, the Mises Caucus is primarily people who came out of that Ron Paul movement. Like, now they were a lot of them were younger and like teenagers or young adults when that happened. Now they're in their 30s and 40s, and obviously the GOP is not the avenue they want to go anymore, because the idea is like, well, the Ron Paul movement ended when Ron Paul stopped running for office. But if you could get that movement going in a political party that is named after the actual philosophy, there's no telling how effective that could be in the long run. Even if again, it's not about winning elections. It's like, I would actually be happy if libertarians never won any federal elections. But running people, I think, is important, because they get that platform and they get to call people out. They get media exposure and stuff. I mean, if we get Dave Smith on the Ben Shapiro show, like, that's a win. I'm sorry. Like, by any means necessary, if we get Dave Smith on the Ben Shapiro show, like, that would be amazing.
It's honestly, it bugs me how much the Daily Wire people ignore some of the Liberty people. Like, Dave Smith, Michael Malice goes on Glenn Beck. He goes on Dusty Kelly. He goes on Joe Rogan. Like, he's a Dave Rubin. He's all these major conservatives, and the Daily Wire, the PragerU people, completely avoid even mentioning these other people. It's such a grift.
They Andrew Clavin had Tom Woods on one.
That was my favorite episode of Clavin.
Yeah, but then it's like nothing after that.
Clavin is the only reason I still like the Daily Wire, honestly. Like, I like him. He's not as good as he's a libertarian, but he's pretty good. If the Daily Wire would just lose Matt Ross and Michael Knowles, it'd be better.
Shapiro's great on economics. I mean, like, a week or two ago, he had Peter Schiff on, and he was been calling out the Fed and stuff, and I'm like, awesome, cool. But like, God, like, he needs like Scott Horton or Dave Smith to like smack smack him in the head and get him to get off his awful foreign policy. He's even softened on he's not that bad on the war on drugs. I mean, he's a bit
he seemed like Larry Elder and him. We were talking about drugs on the Sunday special, and they were both very much in favor of the I think what Shapiro said, he's in favor of drug legalization for all drugs, but the ones that can cause you to, how do you put it, lose your sense of reason, that can cause you to be violent. Like, if PCP is proven to make you more violent, then that one can cause you to affect outward. But besides that, he was in favor of legalizing everything else. And I was like, a win's a win. Like, I'll take it.
Shapiro, the problem with Shapiro, and like a lot of people like him, is that like he's inconsistent, and it's maddening because he knows, like, he should know better. Like, he's really good. Like, he understands that the government is a force of coercion. That at the end of every law is a man with a gun compelling you to do it. He knows that centralization doesn't work, that government sucks. What's his saying? Government sucks at everything. Yeah. But then he just has these weird blind spots, and it's just like, it's like, Ben, you know the arguments you make about why gun restrictions are bad? Because it's a slippery slope, and it'll either be completely ineffective, or things that are vague will be abused to restrict rights. It's like, if you say no substance can be used if it has a likelihood to make you violent, it's like, alcohol could do that, right?
Yeah.
Couldn't it?
And some people smoke weed. Some people drink alcohol and get really violent immediately. It was a weird standard. I think he's very pragmatic. I think he said that to like kind of keep some of the boomers he follows him on board still, and then still appeal to the young guys. I would say Ben Shapiro, I think he's becoming a non-entity, honestly. I mean, there was a poll of like who was the best conservative, put on by Lone Conservative, and like Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh, I think beat him. Like, the conservative movement is moving much more towards trad cons, and so I think he's. I mean, a lot of people I talk to on Twitter, like, you say Ben Shapiro's small government is the reason we lose everything. I'm like, if that's your definition of small government, I must be a crazy person, and they think I am, but that's a different conversation.
I mean, I appreciate him for what he did in terms of that like he was useful in terms of getting me to where I am in my personal journey. But yeah, I've definitely grown past him a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, we're at an hour and 5 minutes.
Wow,
basically,
time flies.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, I think the LP stuff. I mean, like, there's no way like I would need 2 or 3 hours to explain everything that's happened this past week. But just basically, like, for those who don't know, like, go look into it. Like, Tom Woods, Karen Ann Harlos had a good interview talking about this. Michael Heiss was on Dave Smith's show, Part of the Problem, and they talked about this. So I would suggest, like, I'll link those in my page if you have been living under a rock, just came out of
Break the
sleep
Cycle
or something. Break the Cycle too. Another
that was
good
my
show.
favorite one personally. I enjoyed that one.
I'm actually going to be on Break the Cycle in July, July 22nd, I think. I have to check my my message with Josh, but yeah, awesome. I'll be on there next month to talk about libertarianism and Christianity. So people need to go check that out. I'm excited to be on Josh's show. I love Josh. I'm a big supporter of his. And
he's great.
We need more. I told him, he was like, 3 weeks ago, he was like, I don't know if I'm going to run for at-large again. I was like, no, you have no choice. You are running for at-large again. And now I'm like, okay, no, like you have to. You cannot leave. Like, after all this shit that just went down, we need people like you to stay. And, like, he's doing such a good job, and his podcast is amazing. So, I'll link those things in my show notes for people that just haven't been covering this if they want to go check it out. But basically, like, it's really interesting because it's really showing, like, I get why people like Craig criticize the LP, and you can see, like, these are the people that have been running it, and their priorities are just so out of whack. Like, they want centralization, they want control, they care mostly about winning elections and passing laws, and I'm like, that's not libertarianism. Yeah. It's just not. Sorry, you shouldn't, like, I'm not going to apologize for the takeover language. You say, like, oh, that's, like, not a good way to win support and good faith. It's like, I don't know, like, if I think a bunch of statists who aren't libertarian are running the party called the Libertarian Party, and you're not doing a good job, like, I don't know, like, I think you deserve to be not forcefully removed, but, like, people can come in and vote you out. Sorry.
Honestly,
and if people don't, my last thing is, when people complain about that, it's like, I don't know, it sounds like you agree a lot with Hans Hermann Hoppe now about why democracy sucks.
I love that dude. That dude's, every time I read anything about him, I'm like, that dude's based as all get out. He's...
Oh yeah, Hoppe's awesome.
I love him.
Yeah, I mean, and people complain, like, people are always like you guys are so like, people complain about the Mises Caucus a lot because Heiss. Like, we don't have a democratic structure, so Heiss like can't be voted out. And now
why would you want to vote him out in the first place?
Well, and then people are complaining about us coming in and voting people out. I'm like, it's a takeover. It's like, it sounds like you agree with me. Democracy sucks.
Yeah, I have that on a T-shirt. I have a T-shirt that says "Democracy sucks," and on the back of it says "Read some Rothbard." No, democracy is cleansed. That's what it is. Now, I have two things I want to say real quick. One, about the LP, if anyone in the LP called him a libertarian and was not voiceful against the lockdowns, they're not a libertarian. Like, I hate to say not a real libertarian, but, like, that's, like, the only metric that really matters in my lifetime right now is, were you against the lockdowns? Outside of that, whatever. We can disagree about it, but that's the most important thing. Number two thing I want to say was, you had my favorite tweet of the last year. You had a tweet, how to go, Christian conservatives need to learn how to destroy the One Ring and not use it for power. You made a Lord of the Rings reference or symbolism, and it was absolutely beautiful. Favorite tweet of the year. I just had to mention how much I love that tweet. Like, it was awesome.
Oh yeah, I love using that metaphor. It's so true. It's just like, too many Christians want to use the state, the ring of power, to win the war, which is, like, to them, like, the culture war, I guess. And it's just like, and I'm sorry, like, people are upset with, like, a lot of the woke stuff and how, like, they're pushing legislation, pushing their views on people, and I'm like, do I like that? No. Is this predictable blowback from decades and centuries of Christians doing the same shit? Yes. Same thing like when Ron Paul said, like they don't hate us for our freedom, they hate us because we're occupying their countries and bombing them, and we'd be doing the same thing. So it's like, like, force gets, like you can't treat people like shit and use violence against them and force to make them comply to you without inevitably getting blowback. And that Ron Paul was correct when he said that about the war on terrorism, and I continue to say that about to my Christian brothers and sisters about the culture war. It's like lay down your arms and actually, like, you fight the culture war by being like Christ. Turn the other cheek, be a servant. Like Jesus, the Son of God, like God incarnate, said to be a leader, to be a ruler is to be a servant. And he washed his apostles' feet. Like, I'm sorry, like that is the most like beautiful representation of what Christians are supposed to be doing, I think.
But
we're supposed to be being a servant.
But Jacob, they want to go be public servants. It's the same thing. They want to go be public servants and join the state. It's the same principle.
Yeah, there's a problem there where the state uses these euphemisms like public servant and representatives and
it's so
collateral damage.
Yeah, what is that one? The state's words are ridiculous. The state is ridiculous. That's just enough to say.
Yeah, we could have just summed that whole podcast up just like that. The state is ridiculous. That would have been enough.
Put that on a t-shirt. The state is ridiculous. That's it.
Yep. So yeah, people go. We're gonna do more of this. I'm gonna me and Caleb are gonna keep having these conversations, either weekly, bi-weekly, something like that. We're still working it out, but I like what Caleb's doing over on the Catholic Libertarian. This stuff's gonna be in his show too. So go follow him on Twitter. Do you have Facebook at all?
I do, but it's mainly just to troll my cousins and aunts. Like it's for boomers. That's about it.
Yeah, but so I'll have his Twitter handle in the show notes too. Follow Caleb on Twitter, follow his YouTube channel and all that, and there'll be more to come. He'll be back, and we'll keep this conversation going, trolling all the statists and the Christians till they shape up or quit like the LNC people are. So that seems to be a good strategy.
It is. I like the strategy.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Caleb, for coming on and talking, and we'll talk again soon, man.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.